we rule the cricket world. Now the rule seems coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 59 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. I am your co-host, Mashal St. Patrick Hewitt, and you know who's with me.
Yeah, Santoki here. And despite both sides languishing at the bottom of the World Test Championship, we've got a highly anticipated series between West Indies and England. And you know, England, Mash, they promised a reset of their red ball cricket to revive their fortunes, which is easier said than done. You know, West Indies, we've been trying that for about 25 years now. So, be interesting to see how this series goes, Mash. But we're joined by a very special guest, aren't we?
Indeed, we are. We're excited for this one because we are joined by none other than George Dobell. I'm putting him up there as, I don't know, George will say it himself in a minute, but what are we saying, Santoki? George is number one now is when it comes to England cricket. And if you want to get someone's opinion on English cricket, you've got to go to George Dobell. You've got to see what he's saying. And in fact, you could argue cricket in general. You've got to go and speak to George Dobell about the be-all and the end-all. But George, as I hand over to you, how are you doing? How's life treating you? You've got a flight to catch in a couple of days.
I have. Hey, thanks for having me. That's a very kind welcome. Look, I'm about to go to the Caribbean, so I'm very lucky. Loving life. It's one of the great tours, and yeah, really looking forward to it.
Indeed, and as Santoki kind of said at the top of the show, West Indies England, well, certainly to us two, it always feels like a bit of, if you can get such a thing. As much as England see Australia as their pinnacle series, arguably you'd say that for West Indies, England is our pinnacle series. It's the one where we seem to turn up and gee ourselves up for the most, particularly in home conditions, when the English turn up. And this this series feels, I don't even know what to call this series. I keep calling it the existential crisis series. As Santoki says, we've been having ours now for a good 25 years. And we're never, ever seemingly going to come out of it. But it's been interesting to watch from a West Indian perspective to see England almost have a meltdown about their red ball game as they approach this series with the West Indies. And it's such an open-ended question, but it's the right place to start. And I don't know how you try and narrow it down to a short answer, George. But what on earth is going on with England right now?
Well, you have to remember what their priority is. And the priority of the ECB is to make money. And it just so happens that cricket is one of the things they deal with. So they're not a high-performance sporting organisation. They're a business. And they've taken a lot of short-term decisions, as probably happened in the Caribbean too a few years ago. And they are reaping the rewards of that. In some ways, they're positive. You know, they obviously had a very strong focus on white ball cricket, which, as I say, did reap rewards, but it was at the cost of the red ball game. I think they really made a business decision about the way that the game was going, the direction of cricket in general. And they decided that the future of the game was white ball, limited overs. I'm not positive they're right, but I guess they're sort of making it come true. In terms of this series, it's a really interesting one. I think I've seen England win pretty much. I've seen them win in India. I mean, that's a ridiculous thing to have seen, really. I've seen them win in Australia, and you wonder if that will ever happen again. I've seen them win in Sri Lanka and South Africa. I've never seen them win in the Caribbean. I've never seen them win a Test series in the Caribbean. I don't know how many. This might be my fifth, might be fourth, might be fifth. So I've been there quite often, and almost every time England have expected to win, I think. Wrongly. I mean, it's often been hubristic, as English cricket often is. But there's been a huge amount of confidence about going to the Caribbean because the West Indies haven't been strong, as we know, for quite a long time. But there is something about this series that does seem to bring the best out in West Indies, which is great. When you talk about it being a big tour for England, it's not a barometer series. It absolutely isn't in terms of how they measure themselves, but it's a massively popular tour for spectators. And you will see every plane full. I can guarantee that because I've been struggling to get a ticket. Every hotel full, every bar will be full, and there'll be a lot to enjoy and celebrate about the game generally. But you're right. The general point is English cricket is in crisis. West Indies cricket hasn't perhaps is in transition, but you know, those roots of recovery are taking a while to poke out of the ground, aren't they?
Most definitely. And Santokia, I mean, I'll hand over to you, but we're in a weird situation here, Santokia, because we possibly start a series against someone other than Bangladesh, Zimbabwe, as possible slight favourites. Very, very slightly. Very, very slightly. I don't want to get overconfident at all, Santoki, but what do you reckon, Santoki? Are we slight favourites in this series?
You know what? It's as George rightly mentioned, I think England have only won in the West Indies once since 1968, so 54 years. But if we do pull off a win against England, it will slightly be seen as an unexpected underdog victory when form kind of suggests we should be favourites. But I guess the transitional nature of the West Indian side means we can never really be clear favourites in this series. But it'd be interesting to know, George, you talked about this not being a barometer for the England side. Obviously, they're coming off a loss in the Ashes. If England were to lose against West Indies, say 3-0, do you think that would affect the position of Joe Root as captain, or do you think that he's sort of been given leeway for the next few series?
It's a really good question, and you would think that it should affect him. But I think the fact that they have dropped some very well-known players and that they are basically accepting they're almost starting again with a 4-year view, that he probably will be cut quite a lot of slack. If they had an absolute catastrophe and didn't just lose 3-0, but you know, lost those games by embarrassingly heavy margins, if you know, he was caught drinking at 4 o'clock in the morning or something, you know, if it was really chaotic, then yeah, he could come under a lot of pressure. But there is an acceptance that there aren't obvious alternatives for his role, which is a pathetic situation, and also that you know, he has captained through some difficult circumstances. Look, I wouldn't have sacked the coach or the managing director after the Ashes. I know that journalists are very often criticised for calling for heads, but I went the other way with it, and I wouldn't have sacked Peter Moores a few years ago either. So, you know, I think that we sometimes blame individuals who have been given responsibility for impossible situations. And I thought Joe Root and Chris Silverwood and co were basically asked to captain Titanic just after the incident with the iceberg. You know, they had no chance on that tour in Australia. So I don't know that it will define his future, because they've already lost so many games so heavily in series which has seen more. You see, I don't know how many people will be watching as well. I don't know. It's going to be very popular at the grounds. You know, as I say, England will bring as many tourists as there will be room for them. But if you remember on the last tour, Mark Wood produced an absolutely fantastic performance was that in St. Lucia? It must have been, and it's like no one saw it, because it was, you know, it was one of those brilliant "I wish I was there" sort of moments, or you're glad you're there moments, and yeah, he's still not as rated as highly maybe by the average cricket supporter in England as he might be, and I think it's because, you know, the series had gone. It's on pay-per-view TV. Cricket is a niche sport in the UK, as you're aware, I think. You know, so and that means that allows players to maybe sometimes, or captains, administrators, to get away with things because they maybe don't have the scrutiny on them that they might have.
It's interesting that you mention the last tour, because I just want to briefly link back to that and see. I'm going to postulate a theory or thesis to you and see if you agree with this. So 2019, England turned up to the Caribbean. The World Cup was later that year. And to me, England had the wrong mindset towards the Test series. It was almost like it was an afterthought. I remain unconvinced that they played a their maximum. Whether I'm not saying they deliver, I'm not saying they threw or anything like that. What I mean is they played underneath their expected levels, and we took a 2-1 series win. And at that point, it was yet another moment where everyone said West Indies have turned the corner. If I could give you a fiver for every the amount of times I've heard West Indies have turned the corner, but at that time, I remember looking at the England team saying, why have they got such a lackadaisical attitude towards a test series? And yes, we deserve to win. And yes, actually, it was a very comfortable 2-1 test series win, all things considered. Now, that's 3 years ago. You fast forward to 2021. Granted, there's been a pandemic in between, and we have to accept that there are mitigating circumstances around the fact that there's been a pandemic. But do you just think that, I'm not saying the test series versus us was the start, but do you think that attitude hasn't gone away where England just haven't prepared properly or haven't, preparation is probably the right word. They haven't given the requisite preparation.
Categorically, yes. I mean, your observation there that the Test cricket was a bit of an afterthought, absolutely right. Yeah, they played. Look, just one thing I would, I'm not exactly correcting you, but one thing I'd want to say is that there was really some sensationally good cricket from West Indies actually at times on that tour. You know, their bowling in the first innings in Barbados was brilliant. Kimo Roach was outstanding. Actually, Shannon Gabriel was outstanding the whole series. He sort of, I don't know, he just went up a level. He has obviously become a very fine bowler. And then obviously Jason Holder had a magnificent series, bullied England at times. I thought Darren Bravo in particular was terribly brave in Antigua. Yep. He played, one of the innings I most admired from him in his career. And actually, I did think he was back and this was going to be a new start for him. And actually, it was a bit of a false dawn, wasn't it? But those things did happen, and they were genuinely impressive. And I wouldn't want to take any. I wouldn't want to take anything away from that, because honestly, I thought they deserved a lot of credit for that. Equally, it was brave to play with a Duke's ball. It was brave to play on spicy wickets. They basically said to England, "Yeah, you think you got good bowlers with the Duke's ball? We think we've got better."
Yeah,
brilliant. It was such fun cricket, because not every series in the Caribbean has been. I mean, the 2009 Test in Barbados is one of the most boring games of cricket I've ever seen. It might still be going. Sarwan's still batting.
That series is the one where we defended a 1-0 win for the
and it was 600 plays 700 in that game, and there was a bit of that in that series. And anyway, it wasn't a lot of fun. The last series was a lot of fun, and actually I thought it was a bit of a reflection of West Indies cricket with getting things right, because there was a limited over series as well, and it was played on very different, very good wickets, and that was thrilling in a different way. I mean, it was dominated by Chris Gale, really, wasn't it? And it was really, really good fun. And that is the point after all. And also, as the series went on, there were a lot more local people in the crowd. It did feel like a new start. It did. I'm sorry, it did, and we were wrong, but it did at the time. So, but the things that bothered me about the England performance were, I mean, did Roston Chase take an 8 for in Barbados?
Yeah, 8 for 60, if I remember right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not having a go, because he's a very competent cricketer. But of all the collapses I've seen, and I've made a living watching England collapses. I mean, I've seen them bowled out in a session, 5 times or something. Honestly, losing 8 for against Roston Chase, it didn't turn. That was as bad as it gets. So Roston Chase, I mean, well, you know what he does. He just changes his pace and bowls tight. Really, and I'm not having a go, but that's what he does. He took an 8 for. That was hopeless batting, absolutely hopeless. So your observation there that they didn't seem particularly prepared to play Test cricket. Well, that wasn't isolated to that series. That's the way England have been for a few years. It was the philosophy was all about go out there, be positive, score a few runs as quickly as you bloody can before you get a ball with your name on it. And it's naive, unsophisticated cricket, and they were outplayed. So Darren Bravo played a series-defining innings. I can't remember how many he got. Was it only 60 or something?
I think it was 50 off like 200 and I'm going to say 230, 240 balls.
Ever 50 by a West Indies batter, I reckon. Yeah. And I was lucky enough to interview him the next day. I went to their hotel and interviewed him by the pool, and he he was covered in bruises. And he's not really renowned as being that sort of player, is he? Honestly, quite a lot of credit is due. So he played the sort of, I wanted to define it into the series because he battled it out. He dared to be dull, and he was brave. And there was none of that from England. They were a shot a minute, really. And while they've been terribly fun to watch in the last few years, they haven't been particularly competent in Test cricket for those reasons. So, you know, when they talk about a reset, well, what have they done to reset? They just picked a few other people. It's not like they've played games since the Ashes. These are all the people who they didn't deem good enough to pick for the Ashes 6 months ago, whatever it was. You know, I don't really see there's been any reset yet. All they've done is sack a few people. I mean, it's very odd that they've sacked, you know, Anderson and Broad, basically. It remains like your dishwasher goes wrong. They've gone out and bought a new washing machine. It's ludicrous. No one said, you know, the problem with England is Anderson, Broad, the number 4. They were almost the only good things. And those are what they've changed. So it's not really a reset. It's just a desperate selection gamble. And they hope that they'll stumble across some success there. But, you know, no particular reason. There aren't shortcuts to Test success. I think you've got to go back to basics and have a really strong domestic product. I'm always going to say that, though. I'm a terrible bore.
Well, Santoki, I'll let you take that on.
No, I agree. I guess you can't really reset without any preparation in between your last Test match. But George, if we were to look at the Test squad name for the West Indies, are there any sort of new names or new faces in this squad who you are happy with breaking through into the England side?
Yeah. I was very pleased to see Josh Buttler back. Okay. Sorry, Josh Buttler back. Josh Buttler dropped and Ben Foakes back. Sorry, I thought that England's selection had become really, really cosy. I always had this image of Josh Buttler on the phone with Ed Smith when he was head selector, basically, you know, you hang up. No, you hang up, Josh. No, you hang up. It just became cozy as hell. It didn't seem to matter what he did. And I'm really glad to see Ben Foakes come back in because I think he is one of England's few indisputably excellent Test cricketers. And it'll be a lot of fun to watch him. I'm sure he'll excel with the gloves. I hope he does well with the bat. I think he's got the higher batting average than any specialist batter England have given a debut to since 2013, which is interesting, isn't it? Any of them, yeah? So I think that guy can play. Some of those other selections are really interesting. I'm very happy to see Fisher in the squad. Don't think there's much doubt about his ability, whether he can stay fit. He's maybe played 25 first-class games in an 8-year career. That's a worry. Alex Lees as opening bat. I mean, he's deserved his call. He's not at all pretty. He is probably the sort of player that I've been calling for. You know, he's patient. He'll earn his runs, and he's probably deserved the call. Having said that, they have picked everyone with a pulse and bladder control who opens the bat in county cricket, and he was the last one they hadn't tried. Really, I mean, we are on that sort of on that side of other people who might going to go. You know, Saqib, people will have seen a bit maybe in white ball cricket. Saqib Mahmood, he's a talented guy. Talent is the most overused word I've had in cricket. I mean, he's got one first-class fifer. And I think he's good. I'm not having a go. I think he's a really good, talented guy. I just think expectations have to be measured with him. He's quite quick. He's not quick. You know, he's not an outright fast bowler. He's not someone who absolutely knows his trade. He's someone who, if he's picked, you're going to have to be a wee bit patient with. And then the spinners, you know, Matt Parkinson, he improves every time I see him, particularly in the nets. He's gone from being absolutely miles away to being, you know, a viable contender. I'll be pleasantly surprised if he makes it. I think his brother's a better bet as a Test cricketer. But yeah, I don't know. Those are probably the new names, aren't they? And there are some very familiar ones. Chris Woakes, I guess, is a controversial one because he's retained his place despite that awful overseas record. I mean, I'm pleased it's happened because, you know, he's the nicest man in the world and obviously a very good cricketer. But he is lucky. You know, I say that as his biggest fan. After, you know, you average, I don't know how many tests he's played overseas, but plenty now. It's not a tiny sample size. You know, it hasn't happened for him. My worry would be that he's learned to bowl overseas. And look, I know it's a Duke's ball, but he's learned to bowl overseas when maybe he can't quite hit the pitch as hard as he used to. I don't think he can hit sort of 88 miles an hour anymore. I think he's more an 83 mile an hour bowler. I think sometimes that matters. But we'll see. I'd bloody love him to prove me wrong and have a great series, because he's worked hard. But you know, those knee injuries, they take a lot out of a bowler, and I just worried he can't hit the pitch quite as hard.
I'm surprised that, I mean, for those who will be watching this visual, you can see the team, just for the benefit of those who are listening on the audios. So the team actually is Crawley, Lees, Root, Bairstow, Lawrence, Stokes, Pope, Folkes, Woakes, Robinson, Overton, Mahmood, Wood, Parkinson, Fisher, Leach. Now, there's so much to look at with this squad, and actually let's go to the headline figure, because you mentioned it briefly, George, but leaving out Broad and Anderson, so to the average West Indian, we cannot believe they've been left out. I don't think there's any opposing fans. It doesn't matter really who England would have been playing. I think the reaction would have been the same as England can afford to leave both of them out. Not even one of them, both of them out. Now, my issue is this. When England play their summer series, both of them are going to be back in the side, you would assume, because even if England are trying to transition away from Broad and Anderson, they're going to have to get a farewell of sorts. So let's just fast forward to the summer and say, okay, it's this summer then. But what is being achieved? Why didn't they just bring both and play them in? They don't have to play together, as we saw in Australia. You could play them in one test and rest one and so on and so forth. What do you actually think was the rationale behind just dropping them both? So who's the leader of the pack now? If who's this is a West Indian tour. So, okay, Wood's been before and has had success in the West Indies before, but it's a relatively new pace attack in quote unquote foreign conditions with zero experience to lead them. That doesn't seem like the wisest decision making.
Well, I reckon Woakes was there in 15 and 19.
Oh, Woakes, sorry, yeah, Woakes.
So Woakes will probably be the attack leader, and obviously Ben Stokes is a very experienced player, but Ollie Robinson is a skillful bowler. He will be an absolute nightmare for West Indies openers in particular. You know, so those are those are the guys who are going to play. I think. Look, you raise a really good question. One thing, just even before talking about it, I would say we've got to stop talking about them together. They're different people. You know, they're not twins. They're not conjoined, is what I was going to say. It must annoy Stuart Broad in particular. I think what is he, 4 or 5 years younger?
Mm.
We probably shouldn't be thinking about them. We should. It's sort of simplistic to group them together all the time. I think some sense of succession planning is reasonable and sensible. I agree with you. They could have gone on a tour, you would think, and been. Yeah, one of them could have played. You could easily rotate them, or you could not play them, I guess. Is there a sense that they are sort of brooding? They're such big characters that, of the huge tree, nothing grows in its shadow? I mean, there might be a bit of that, but equally, who are these little delicate flowers what do they expect Test cricket to be like? I would think there's a lot to learn. If you're somebody who can't learn from what Anderson and Broad are doing as a bowler, I don't know, that would worry me a bit. Fast bowling is a tough business. I think fast bowlers have every right to be a bit grumpy at times, and God knows Jimmy Anderson could do grumpy. But there's such professionalism there that I kind of think that you actually maybe want to learn from some of their habits. No one in the England camp has said they've been dropped because they're overbearing. But you wonder, because otherwise it's very hard to work out. I think it's a slightly patronising decision towards West Indies as well. I think it's sort of saying, they're probably our best bowlers still, but we're not going to take them because this is a rebuilding tour. They haven't said that either. But, you wonder. You say they'll be back in the summer. Will they? I don't know. Other bowlers are having an opportunity. And if they take it, it makes it very hard to come back. Equally, it'll be a new coaching setup in the summer, in the English summer. So anything could happen. But it strikes me as a huge decision for an interim to come in and, drop 2 players. Very little fanfare about it. I don't know. Being dropped, I guess, is always harsh. I believe that both of them, and I haven't spoken to either of them, but I believe both of them are smarting at the lack of communication they've had. You know, very, very short phone calls, and we're not even sure that Joe Root was party to the decision. So, you know, the confusion that you're talking about from sort of Caribbean cricket followers, I think that's pretty much shared from England cricket followers. There is a way to plan for the future without being quite so drastic. As I say, they could have rested and rotated throughout the series. And it's not like English cricket is so poor they couldn't have afforded another hotel room or two.
Let me ask, before we move on to the West Indies squad, George, I'm going to ask you to make a prediction. So if, say, for instance, England win 3-0, Mahmood, Woakes, Robinson, Wood, they take a bucket load of wickets in this, and the reset is deemed a success. Gauging the mood of the ECB and their relationship with the players, do you think they would give Jimmy Anderson a farewell test match in the summer, similar to Sachin Tendulkar, or would it literally be like how West Indies treated Shivnarine Chanderpaul, and it'll just be a message on WhatsApp saying your test career is over?
Well, there's a middle course, isn't there? There's a middle course. I'm not a big fan of farewell tests because it's a team game and it's not about individuals. And I actually think that the sort of the cult of the individual and the huge amount of interest in individual stats has sometimes held India in particular back, and it can hold any side back. But so I don't really, I'm personally not a massive fan of the sort of one-off celebration test. And I don't think he would like that either. I think he would find it a bit patronizing. You know, he's played 170 times for England. He's 39, Jimmy Anderson. If people didn't realise the end was coming and they wanted to see him one more time, what have you been doing? I mean, this was going to come. Having said that, I wouldn't write him off either. You know, if he gets the bit between his teeth and starts the season bowling for Lancashire, well, there's anyone better. He'll clean up, and it's entirely possible they'll pick him again. Same with Broad. I really admire Broad because he had got to the stage where he was a diminished bowler, and he reinvented himself at an age when bowlers just don't, you know, mid-30s kind of, and he changed himself and has eked another couple of years. Eked sounds negative. I don't mean that. And has enjoyed another couple of years as a fine bowler, but he's not quite what he was because he needs a bit more assistance from the surfaces. That's absolutely fine. But he has shown several times in the last couple of years. I mean, I think he's averaging 20 with the ball in the last 2-3 years. So, and you know, it is a Duke's ball, and if the pitches are as they were last time, he would be very, very difficult for West Indies batters. So he might, I suppose. There is a test at Trent Bridge. I don't think there is one at Old Trafford where Jimmy plays, and it is possible that Stuart Broad would settle for that. And it's pretty obvious that he has a terrific future in the media. He's absolutely excellent at that stuff. I don't know. All I would say is it doesn't matter really what they've had outstanding careers. I mean, they've had careers that anyone would dream of when they start. And, you know, generally things have to end badly. Otherwise, they wouldn't end. It's the same with just about everything in life, isn't it? Relationships, life, careers. Unless they end badly, they'd be carrying on, wouldn't they?
A good analogy. I was going to say that I get totally where you're coming from with the farewell test. Well, I mean, we've had in the Caribbean, as you well know, we had the furore a couple of months back about whether Chris Gale was going to get a farewell T20, and that was leading to cuss-outs in all directions. I've always said that a player who's performing at the top of their ability, like Jimmy still was, at least should have some kind of say in leaving the right way. Whether that means a farewell test, an official farewell test, no, I'd probably not. But at least having a say in saying, you know what, I'm gonna back away. But you're right to say, George, would that happen though? Because Jimmy's still going at 39 suggests he still thinks he can go at 40. So,
well, yeah, why wouldn't it? I mean, he is a diminishing force again. There were moments in Australia where he did bowl a bit safe. In Adelaide, he did bowl just a bit back of the leg. He didn't go for the throw. He did protect his figures a bit. But then there's something about the character of Jimmy Anderson, which is so wonderful and feisty and determined and such a battler, that I actually, if I'm honest, and I thought it would end with him being carried off. I thought he would never know he's beaten. That's one of his incredible qualities. That even when he is tired, even when the ball isn't swinging, he still believes he's going to get the guy out. And I thought he'd do a hammy or something and have to be carried off. I wonder if Strauss, you see, thinks he's making it easier for the next guy by dealing with this big problem. But of all the problems in English cricket, having two highly motivated, successful fast bowlers, that's like having too much money and not knowing where to invest it. That's not a problem. It's amazing that we've made one of the strengths into a weakness. Good sides do the opposite. Look, I personally, I think Strauss likes a statement. I think he likes the big statement. Last time he came in, he got rid of KP, yeah? This time it's behind that apparently sort of conservative exterior. I don't know, he's a bit of a showman, isn't he?
Well, he certainly made the state. You couldn't make a bigger statement, really and truly. And it remains to be seen, irrespective of how the tour goes, it remains to be seen. The story doesn't end there, of course, because from March, the end of March onwards, up until the summer, everyone will want to know who the new head coach is going to be and so on and so forth. But we won't delve into that just yet. Oh, sorry, go on, George, sorry.
Well, no, but you're right. Actually, he might argue, Strauss might argue he's making it easier for the next guy. But actually, first question, first presser, what are you going to do with Anderson abroad?
Exactly.
So I don't really see it makes it easier. And I just think that I thought Silverwood had it. Did you notice when Broad was dropped a couple of times or not picked a couple of times in Australia? He was vocal, but actually he was kind of okay with it. And I thought they were heading in an okay way. I mean, did they play 3 tests each? Something like that. I thought they were dealing with this issue. And as I keep saying, it's not really a problem when you've got two wildly successful, highly motivated, skillful bowlers who want to keep playing. I mean, of all the problems in English cricket to deal with, it's 1008th.
Out of 1008 as well. But
yeah, basically.
But speaking of problems, you are close enough to West Indies cricket as well, George, to be well versed in the myriad of problems that we have within our cricket as well. First things first, before we get to the questions, just letting everyone know the squad. So for the first test, this squad has only been named first test. I think everyone thinks it's the first two, but it's just the first. Craig Brathwaite, obviously captain, Jermaine Blackwood, vice captain, John Campbell, recalled, Shamar Brooks, not recalled because he's been in the past squads, but around. Nkrumah Bonner, Jason Holder, Carl Mayers, Joshua Da Silva, Kemar Roach, Jaden Seals, Alzari Joseph, Anderson Phillip, Vasami Permo. Notable absentees for the West Indies. Shannon Gabriel has broken down again, playing regional cricket, which is why Anderson Phillip is in the squad. Jeremy Solazano, I don't know if you call it a notable omission, but had been selected to go to Sri Lanka, got concussion, and is no longer in the squad. John Campbell has been recalled at as his replacement. Vasami Permo retains his place from Sri Lanka. Rakeen Cornwall is not in the squad, but generally speaking, and Shea Hope and Roston Chase are out of the middle order. Neither are in the President's 11, and very much told by Desmond Haynes, the new lead selector, that they must go and rebuild their game in domestic cricket. So it remains to be seen if and when they ever return to West Indies colours. Santoki, you and I have spoken about this squad behind the scenes, on camera. What do you want to put to George about this squad?
Yeah, I guess firstly with Desmond Haynes and Ramnaresh Sarwan taking over as selectors, a lot of people in the West Indies were expecting some sort of overhaul similar to England, but they've kind of kept it pretty conservative in terms of their selection. The big debate was whether Solazano or John Campbell would get that vacant opener spot. They've gone for John Campbell based on first-class performances. But George, I guess a general sort of question: what do you make of this squad? Looking at it.
I don't know. I suppose one of the things that strikes me a bit, if I'm honest, is the lack of progression from 2019. I think there were some injuries around, though, aren't there? I mean, we may have seen the best of Shannon Gabriel. He is a big unit, and it takes a lot to get him absolutely right. And unless he is, it's probably not going to work. I've enjoyed Shannon Gabriel a lot, and I think he's a bit underrated in I don't know why, actually. Maybe because we've set the bar so high in terms of talking about West Indies fast bowling over the years, but in recent years, absolutely terrific. Anyway, so I'm sorry that he's not there. Shane Thomas he's injured as well, isn't he?
T20s, injured, can't. His fitness is always a concern. So yeah, in essence.
So it's just that I think that last time England were there, they would have seen a lot of Shane Thomas bowling on the outfield and very much been talked about as the next big thing. And he just hasn't kicked on. And actually, I might say the same as that with Hetmeyer, who didn't have a brilliant series, but played brilliant shots. And you think, oh, hello, this guy. And a few others, actually. I don't know, you tell me, but Kemo Paul played a test in that series, didn't he?
He
and
did.
I thought he looked like a really exciting. Well, he is an exciting cricketer, obviously. But it just seems that some of these guys haven't kicked on. And Hope, I mean, wow. You just thought he had the world at his feet a few years ago, didn't you? A bit of a worry that those guys haven't kicked on. And equally, you know, John Campbell, you would have to say, has had quite a large sample size of Test cricket. I don't think England's bowlers are up nights in cold sweats worried about him. But, you know, again, maybe he'll prove me wrong. I actually think that the sort of lower middle order, depending on where De Silva and Holder bat, that looks quite strong to me. And maybe Joseph will contribute with the bat as well. Maybe he'll would he come in at 9 or so? You know, there's some. I can see them digging Windies out of a hole a few times, but you know, let's be honest, that is not a particularly strong batting lineup.
No, it's not, and I think in essence I've long maintained that this series is going to be determined by whose top 6 holds up the better. I think I'm relatively confident as a West Indian that Roach, Seals, Joseph, Holder will cause England's top 6, well, their entire batting lineup, a problem. I think that's a given. It remains to be seen how gritty the West Indian top 6 can be in home conditions. The last time he played at home versus Pakistan and South Africa, we did not make, I don't think we made over 250 once across the 4 tests. In fact, maybe once we did, but certainly not over 300 across the 4 test matches we played in total versus South Africa.
We're not going to see 5-day games, are we?
No.
I mean, England didn't make 300 in the Ashes in those 5 tests. And I said they didn't make 300. I think they didn't make 200 6 times. So, you know.
I would be shocked if we see a 5-day game. Put it that way.
The only thing I would say is, and I think Windies got this wrong in England. Was it in 2018? No, when was it? 2020, sorry. That series, the lockdown series, where they won the first test and they were good value for it. And they didn't rotate. And I thought the seamers started to look a wee bit jaded. All of them. And you know, it's a terrific attack. You can always understand why you'd want to stick with Gabriel and the others. But they just lost a little bit at times. Yeah, I think it is 3 tests in 3 weeks, really, isn't it? I don't know. Who knows what the pitches are going to be like. But as you say, that first choice attack sounds good, but maybe I've never seen Anderson Phillip bowl, but maybe that's going to have to happen. And as you say, this is only a first test team, and maybe it'll be changed. I mean, the Shannon Gabriel thing, he's not necessarily out for the series, is he?
No. It's just it's, at the moment, it's just announced as being out for this particular test because he broke down in the second first class game that Trinidad played, so he could never play after that. So I think they're trying to get him fit again. Hey,
do you know just another one on my sort of list of guys who maybe haven't kicked on? Holder, the other Holder, the other Barbadian Holder. Yeah. I mean, he was in and around the squad last time. In fact, he had a little stint as an overseas player in county cricket as well. A bit of a horror stint, to be honest. But I would just be a little bit worried how quite a few guys haven't kicked on. Do you know? That would concern me a little bit. And again, is something that maybe both these sides have in common.
I think with West Indies as well, it hasn't helped. We haven't played regional cricket in 2 years. So essentially someone like a Hope, who you've mentioned, he's just been jumping from test series to test series without any sort of preparation at the regional level, and his confidence has gone. And I think another issue is trying to balance being a multi-format player in the modern day. Like someone like a Shimron Hetmyer, he's got massive IPL deals. His fitness hasn't been up to standard. So he hasn't really focused on red ball cricket. So there's a lot of issues as well outside of it for West Indies, which has meant we've essentially, as you said, reverted back to the core squad who played in 2019, when you would have thought some other guys would have broken through by now.
I don't know what you do with someone like Hope. I always thought he could do with a season of playing, I don't know, grade cricket or something, playing on good wickets. I mean, I can barely be bothered to say it because of the flack I'll get, but the practice facilities at the Kensington Oval are not very good. And, you know, if he's training there, I'm not sure it'll help him massively. But, you know, just to play a season, I mean, in the olden days, you'd say play a season of county cricket, but that won't help him with the wickets as they are. But maybe if he took some time out from white ball cricket and played a season of grade cricket, or even, I don't know. I don't know how practical that is. But there's so much ability there. And I just think he needs to find the confidence and technique to complement that, because yeah, there's a lot there to like, and I still sort of believe in him.
Yeah, I think ultimately you've hit the nail on the head there, and it's something that we've spoken about quite a bit on the Caribbean Cricket Podcast about. The reality, as far as I'm concerned, is that similar to England, again, the parallels are there. Our domestic game is not preparing players for international. That's the fact. That's just facts. The reality of the situation is that's facts. Our domestic game does not prepare players for international cricket. As a result, whoever gets called up to the West Indies international side is basically learning on the job. Phil Simmons has said it. Coaches before him have said it. Stuart Law said it when he was head coach, that we are getting players called up to the international side, and we've got our international head coach trying to fix issues that should have been fixed in the regional game. Now, with English cricket, when I read articles, well, not just by yourself but others, people tend to say you can fix some of the English cricket woes by moving when those first-class games are taking place. So it might not be the standard of first-class cricket in and of itself, whereas with the West Indies, it is the standard. it is the actual standard of cricket that's being played. And we're 25 years deep, and I don't know where if there is any quick fix for that beyond, as you just said, George, players may well, with their agents, have to try and pursue alternative cricket in other, and I don't mean T20, obviously, alternative first-class cricket in other countries, just to expand their experience and game set.
Well, there is some other stuff to look at, and I know they have been looking at, you know, pitch preparation and trying to improve that. Now, these things take a bit of time. And even after you've done it, and I mean, Cricket West Indies were looking at this and investing in it, and I applaud them for doing it. But even after you've done it, it then takes time to play the games on those wickets, and for techniques to change and the standard to improve. So, you know, there aren't necessarily quick solutions to these things. But I do see and hear of some signs of progress. But, you know, it takes a long time maybe to correct quite a lot of years of neglect in some of those areas. But you know, everything I hear them talking about, it does sound like the attention is going in the right areas. You know, I quite believe in the hierarchy of Cricket West Indies at the moment, which is probably not a sentence you hear terribly often, but I actually do.
The thing is, it's good to hear you say that, and I'm sure they'll be glad to hear you say that. But it will not surprise you to know that there are some in the Caribbean who do not share that viewpoint. And the problem is, George, and maybe English cricket is guilty of this as well. If everything is judged by wins and losses, and not a longer term plan, then there's always the desire for quick fixes to solution. And the one thing we didn't talk about is that English cricket seems to be so hell-bent on this Ashes fixation that, of course, if you're going to judge everything by the next Ashes defeat in Australia, then there's always going to be a ripping up the playbook, if you see what I mean. So and maybe it's because of the global cricket calendar that nobody is committed to a kind of longer term approach to, in the same way how everyone can accept that England took a long-term approach to fixing their white ball team. Maybe everyone needs to buckle in now and take a long-term approach.
Well, the amazing thing about the white ball team change was that it wasn't long-term. I mean, it was incredibly fast. They were hopeless at the World Cup in, what was it, February or whatever, and absolutely fantastic when the white ball season started in England in May or whatever it was. You know, the change was dramatic. I suspect that can't be done, but there are all sorts of things that can be looked at. You know, I'm a big fan of hybrid wickets, and maybe that's the way to go in the Caribbean as well as England. They haven't done it in first-class cricket here yet, but they're doing it for white ball cricket. It takes quite a lot of the pressure off the ground staffs. But these are things to be looked at. And you're right, yeah, there's been a lot of turmoil in Caribbean cricket politics over the last few years. And as far as I'm concerned, the good guys kind of won. But, you know, now they need to prove that they were the good guys and they had all the right ideas, because, you know, there's no way of pretending the results haven't followed. But they didn't have a whole, you know, a great hand, did they? I mean, they inherited that great T20 side and then they all retired. I mean, what are you going to do? People get old. And it's not as if there aren't talented young players coming through the other side. There are. And it's not as if test results have fallen off a cliff. They had already fallen. So, you know, you've got to be a bit reasonable, as you say. You've got to take a long-term view. But at least I see people trying to make things better for cricket cricket in the Caribbean, rather than make things better for themselves.
Well, speaking of young talent, Mash, we've got Jaden Seals in the squad, who obviously West Indies have treated with caution throughout the past 2 years, picking and choosing where he plays. He became the youngest West Indian to take a 5-wicket haul against Pakistan in the summer. Mash, I know you're a big fan of Seals. Are you expecting big things from him in this series?
Yeah, I'm expecting him. I mean, I actually applaud the way West Indies have handled him. Yes, I would have liked to have seen him play a couple of those white ball games when he was called up to the white ball squad. But given he's only 20 years old, I'm not mad at it. I know that they have been very, very careful with his development by first picking him to just go with the squad to New Zealand, not to play any games, but just be part of that and play some first-class games against New Zealand. Up to now, as you say, Santoki taking the fifer versus Pakistan and making history. Do I expect him to enhance his early reputation versus England? Yes, most definitely. I think the English batsman, yes, the analysts will be aware of him, but will the English batsman be aware of him? No, I don't think any English batsman will have faced Jaden Seals in any form of cricket. So I can't think of any of them that would have played in CPL. So I don't think they've seen him or faced him, any of them. And I think he's going to be and his pace. So as much as Gabriel's not there, Jaden Seals bowls at high pace. So I think he will be a problem for England. My worry, Santoki, is if he goes on to have a fantastic series versus England, you know what comes next, Santoki.
The last you'll ever see of him.
It's the farewell tour for Seals.
But from watching from afar, George, have you been... Would you say that we're right to be excited by Seals' emergence, or would you say steady on? We said the same about Alzari Joseph when he was 19, 20, etc.
I think it's fair to say both. Look, I haven't seen enough of him, and I don't think I've seen anything of Anderson Phillip to have a really strong opinion. But I was trying to think who he was reminding me of, and it might have been Winston Benjamin, actually, going way back. In that he's basically... Yeah, he seems to get natural shape on the ball, bowl good areas at a decent pace, which is not rocket science. You're in business, aren't you? So, but as I say, talent is the most overrated word in overused word in cricket, or potential, or whatever. And I'm not sure. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure that it's always very helpful to expect so much, and it's such a rich tradition. But this does look like a real opportunity, and you would think he would probably play if fit at least 2 of the tests. So it's you know, it's exciting that he's getting the opportunity and that there is talent coming through, but there always has been. There's always been fast bowling talent. So I don't see that as a huge change, and it would just be really nice to see him, you know, take the opportunity where others such as Thomas at the moment, I guess, haven't.
Most definitely. And so I guess kind of bringing this to an end and wrapping it up, gentlemen. I'll do the usual round table thing here. I mean, this is part of the World Test Championship. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I can safely predict that neither of these sides will be in the World Test Championship final. So that notwithstanding, let's look at it in the sense of a conventional series rather than the points that we should be looking at it as, given it's part of the championship. Santoki, 2-1 West Indies. Or sorry. You can say your own thing. I do not believe we will lose this series, Santoki. That does not mean I think we'll win that doesn't mean I think we'll win per se, but I do not see us losing this series. But I'm not prepared to say a result. What about you, Santoki?
You know what? We had West Indian wicketkeeper Josh De Silva come on one of our live shows and comment that he thinks it will be a draw in Antigua and then 2-0 to the West Indies. So who am I to argue with him? So I'll go with that prediction, 2-0 West Indies.
George, go on.
Well, I don't think there'll be many draws. I just don't. For a start, we don't see many draws in world cricket anymore, unless the pitch is an absolute shocker, which I know Antigua has the ability to be in both ways, actually. But I think that West Indies are favourites, and I'd leave it at that. But all I would say is it's a shootout. You know, there could be real low-scoring shootouts. And if you've got someone like Ben Stokes in the side, he can win you a test. Of course he can. So I think West Indies are favourites, but I'm really looking forward to it. If it's anything like the last series, it'll be such fun. And I hope the wickets are a bit spicy. And I think they got reported last time in Antigua, didn't they? It's a shame. I mean, it did go up and down, fair play. But it was also a lot of fun. So I think it's a lot of fun. I don't really know what's going to happen, but I accept the West Indies are favourites.
Last time I said West Indies were favourites, Santoki, it was before that South Africa series. And we got blown away. So I'll be very careful to try and say that West Indies are favourites for this series. But George, everyone who comes on the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, we always end the episode with the exact same question. And you cannot escape. You will get it as well. As somebody who's been on multiple tours of the Caribbean, what is your favourite ground to watch cricket on in the Caribbean? And in fairness, that's a bit of a hard question because thinking about it, Santoki, we spoke about this recently. England don't even tour the traditional venues anymore. So I don't even know if George can actually say one of Jamaica, Trinidad or Guyana, unless you when England did actually tour those places. But George, what's your favourite ground to watch cricket at in the Caribbean?
Probably, if I'm honest, the Kensington Oval, which is a terribly conservative choice, but it does have an awful lot of history. You know, I could have said Grenada is fun. It really is. But it would be, and it can be absolutely brilliant. But if I'm honest, it's probably Barbados because of the history, because, yeah, you can feel it there, you know. And in fact, I say that you can't just feel it. You'll be able to see Sir Gary Sobers will be there. You'll be able to see him, you know, in silhouette at the other end of the ground. And that is pretty amazing. I mean, that is a proper superstar among us, isn't it? And just the names of the ends. I was lucky enough to see Marshall and Garner in action. So some of those other grounds, I've had fun at all of them. The Sir Viv Richards Stadium has grown on me, actually. And I would say that the food for spectators is possibly better than anywhere I've ever been in the world. Well, you can go out and get ribs and lobster at lunchtime. It's crazy good. So it's grown on me, but it is like taking Lords and putting it in Aberdeen. And it does just seem a bit of a shame to have moved it from St John's. But and that's the case with quite a lot of grounds in the Caribbean, that they were rebuilt for the World Cup, weren't they? And you know, there's not the same history. They're very, they feel like sort of, I don't know, they feel a bit impersonal sometimes. But the Kensington Oval, I know it's changed a bit, but actually it's still pretty magical, and amazing stuff's happened there over so many years. I don't know, you really feel the spirit of cricket.
Brilliant. And to finally end, again, multiple tours, home and you've seen West Indies home and away. Your favourite West Indian batter, and your favourite West Indian bowler. Well, just ever but you've got to have seen them.
Okay, well, I mean, instinctively, emotionally, I would possibly say Viv and Joel, because I was brought up a Somerset supporter. And Viv was extremely nice to me when I was about 10. And I was playing on the outfield and I hit the ball into the woman he was with. I'm not getting him in trouble. I'm sure they were just talking about the economy. And I knocked a glass of wine out of her hand, and he barked at me in that, that deep, incredible voice. And I was terrified. And he obviously saw that, and he said, "Do you bowl and bat?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, if you bowl as well as you bat, we've got another great all-rounder at Somerset." And I was so relieved. I was about 10. And I love him forever. I mean, Brian Lara, from a less emotional stance, Brian Lara's the best batter I've ever seen, if I'm honest. Complete game. Absolutely brilliant defense. Viv, I love Viv, but you could play on the ego. You could. He might murder you. He might get 300 before you got him. But and then Joel as a bowler, I don't know. I still, a couple of years ago, I met Hallam Mosley. I don't know if you guys would know Hallam Mosley. I'm 49. Yeah, I still try and throw like Hallam Mosley, who I first saw when I was 7. It's amazing the impact those guys. He had the coolest throw. Yeah, he used to throw sort of low down. He used to release below knee height, and it went like a bullet. It was the coolest bloody thing I've seen. And he came to say hello to me in the press box at Taunton a couple of years ago. Absolute career high. So I'm going to have my favourite fielder too. Hallam Mosley's favourite fielder. Joel was so magnificent. He was. I mean, obviously there was the physicality of the man. He was so skillful. He was so skillful, and he almost was never beaten. And I have this memory of Alvin Kallicharran murdering him in one game, but I'm not sure if it's a real memory.
But no, if it was Kallicharran, it's real. It's real.
No, it definitely happened, because I've looked at the scorecards and I've asked Vic Marks about it. But I remember it being at Weston-super-Mare, and it definitely didn't happen at Weston-super-Mare. It happened at Taunton. So I don't know if I've conflated. I was like 8 when these things happened. But Joel was so magnificent the way he started in that crouch, rose up to that brilliant, that height with a fantastic wrist position. And people might forget, he was pretty bloody sharp, He was quick, and he did swing the ball. And of course, he had the brilliant Yorker. Maybe he wasn't as skillful as Malcolm Marshall, who was the very, very best I've seen. I could go on like this forever. I was a massive fan of Ezra Mosley. If he'd been English, he'd have played 150 tests. It's absolutely extraordinary. Fast bowling perfection. And you see a little bit of it in Jofra, who I think could maybe hopefully still be really, really special. But I could go on forever, because I've always loved West Indies cricket. As I say, I grew up with Viv and Joel being 2 massive heroes. And if you like cricket and you were English at that stage, you kind of had to love the other sides. Otherwise, it was a long old bloody game, So I've always had a special spot for Pakistan and West Indies, because they were such fun. But I'd have to say, emotionally, Viv, Joel, and Hallam for the fielding. So cool.
Well, you can't get any more definitive than that. I don't think, Santoki, all the people that we've asked questions at the end, no one spoke more or with more passion than George with regards to. Yeah.
Sorry, I probably got on too long. You wanted a quick answer, didn't you?
No. That was perfect. We definitely believe your answers. That's for certain.
and Michelle, as a Jamaican with the Jamaican flag flying proudly behind you, I don't think anyone's mentioned Sabina Park as their favorite boundary.
Never. I'm the only person.
I've never been. For the reasons you said, I mean, I've got no complaints, but people say, oh, isn't it a shame we keep going back to Barbados and Lucia? No, it's amazing. But I mean, I'd love to go those places too, but I've never been to Guyana. I've never been to Trinidad, and I've never been to Jamaica. And of course, I'd love to do that. But these are special places to go. I mean, they're an absolute bloody thrill. Going to the day it gets boring, going to Grenada, Antigua, and Barbados is the time. We're miles away from that happening. I'm looking forward to it hugely.
Most definitely. So, I mean, ladies and gents, it's very, very clear what you need to do. By the time you're listening to this, England will be probably in the midst of their warm-up game versus the President's 11. Remember, there are some there are former West Indian internationals playing in that game who will be vying to try and get into the Test series, as Shane Dowrich, just to name one as an example. So do make sure you're following the Cricketer for their content. Do make sure you're following everything that George is writing and saying, talking, I should say, about this particular Test series. We'll call it the reset Test series for England, for West Indies. It's just another one on the journey that we're on. But thank you very much, George, for coming on the podcast. You've been fantastic as ever. Santosh, do you want to end this one?
Yeah, no, absolute pleasure to have George on and get his insights on both sides. So thank you very much, George, for giving up your time.
Huge pleasure for having me on, and really love the show and really enjoy what you're doing at a time when actually cricket journalism in the Caribbean isn't everything it might have been at previous times in the past. You guys are sort of carrying the flame on, so it's brilliant.
Lovely, lovely. Ladies and gentlemen, that has been episode 59 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. Thank you and good night.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rules seem coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.